By the time most teachers find me, they already know phonics matters. What they're still working out is where the gaps are. So today I'm going to share 7 common mistakes to avoid when teaching phonics. If you're new here, my name is Anna Geiger. I'm the author of Reach All Readers, host of the Reach All Readers podcast, and creator of the Reach All Readers Plus membership. And my mission is to help you bridge the gap between what research tells us and what you do every day in your classroom. Mistake number 1 is not teaching phonics systematically. When I was a balanced literacy teacher, I knew teaching phonics was important. I taught letters and sounds and common patterns like OO and EE. But I also feared that too much phonics instruction would make learning to read sort of mechanical and boring and take away from the ultimate goal, which of course was comprehension. So while I did address phonics during our spelling lessons, that was kind of about it when it came to explicit systematic phonics instruction. Other than that, I only taught phonics as it came up during independent writing conferences or reading conferences. What I should have done was found a strong phonics scope and sequence and moved through it systematically. Research tells us that a systematic approach, rather than embedded or incidental one like I was doing, is much better for students. Mistake number 2 is leaving out review. Even if you teach phonics systematically, it's easy to skip the review piece. But review is so important so our students learn to practice their skills to automaticity. There are different ways to do this. In some phonics lessons, at the beginning of the lesson, there's what we call a visual drill, where the teacher flashes flashcards that include the graphemes that have been taught, and students say the sounds of those graphemes. Another part of the review could be a sound drill, where the teacher says the letters sound and students write the graphemes that spell that sound. So for example, the teacher might say, 3 ways to spell f. And the student would divide their dry erase board into 3 parts, and then they would write F spells f. FF spells f. PH spells f. Of course, what they write depends on how far they are and what you've taught them according to your scope and sequence. Of course, the beginning of the lesson review isn't the only place to include previously taught patterns. You should include review words in your blending practice, your dictation, and of course, your decodable text reading. Mistake number 3 is not giving students enough practice with new sound spellings. Much of my phonics teaching was incidental. For example, during an individual reading conference, when students were reading their leveled books, a child would come across a word maybe they couldn't sound out. Maybe the word, let's say, scooted. And I would say, OO says ooh, and then it would help them sound that word out. So I was teaching phonics as it came up. For some kids, that might have been enough, but most kids needed a lot more than a quick mention in context, especially when it came to spelling. Reading is one thing. Getting lots of practice with those patterns for spelling is another. I wish I'd known that pointing out a pattern during a reading conference is not the same thing as teaching it. Mistake number 4 is waiting too long to teach students to read multi-syllable words. I think there's a common misunderstanding that single-syllable words are for kindergarten and first grade, and once students get to second grade, then we start teaching them to read longer words. But we can teach students to read longer words right from the start. So for example, if you're teaching kindergarten and you're teaching CVC words like cat and pig, you can also teach your students to read compound words that include CVC words, like catnip, pigpen, or sunset. As soon as we begin teaching inflectional suffixes, which is often in kindergarten, like s, es, ed, ing, we can teach students to peel off that suffix, read the base, and then read the word with the suffix. So for example, if we have this word, we can teach students to take off the suffix ing, read the base, f, fix, and put that suffix back on, fixing. Take this word. We can take off the prefix re, the suffix ing, read the base do, and put it all together. Redoing, redoing. Building longer word reading into your phonics lessons is important right from the start because it helps students see that longer words are words to read, not words to skip over or guess at. In the phonics lessons included in my membership, we actually start very early having these types of long word reading as part of the phonics lesson, just for a few minutes. But students learn to peel off the affixes, read the base, and put it all back together. Number 5 is using boring or nonsensical decodable text. And in 2026, as I'm recording this, there's really no excuse for this because there are so many good choices. If we go back about 25 years or so when I started teaching, there weren't a lot of good choices for decodable text, but that has changed. We have so many options now. We don't need to resort to boring decodable text with odd stories or stilted language structure. The stories in our decodable texts should be real stories. And if there's vocabulary our students aren't familiar with, words like jab, rut, or vat. We should teach it. And don't settle for passages alone. Use books with your students with beautiful pictures. In fact, I have a free set on my website, rachelreaders.com. You can download those and use them with your students tomorrow. Mistake number 6 is worrying about 100% decodability when it comes to the decodable texts we're using with our students. Decodable texts are important. They give our students practice with those phonics patterns so they can learn them to automaticity, so they can orthographically map those words. But it's not the end of the world to include a pattern that students haven't been taught yet. If they can't figure out the word on their own, you can simply tell them the pattern or read the word for them so they can keep reading. This is not the same thing that I was doing as a balanced literacy teacher when I was encouraging students to use the picture or the context. We're not doing that, but we're realizing that having a word or 2 or 3 or 4 in a story that includes a pattern not yet taught is not the end of the world. Holding out for perfect decodability at the expense of a good story simply isn't worth it, and it's not necessary. Research doesn't give us an exact percentage of decodability that students will benefit from. Mistake number 7 is holding on to scaffolds too long. When I was in the classroom, I didn't even use scaffolds in the first place. I certainly didn't explicitly teach my students how to sound out words, using final blending or continuous blending, successive blending, none of that. I didn't even know what it was. And I certainly didn't teach them specific ways to sound out longer words, other than find a chunk you know and do your best. So I'm not discounting the importance of those scaffolds. Scaffolds like teaching students to sound out words sound by sound, or with successive blending, where we add one sound and another, put those together and add another sound. Those are all important things. Flexible syllable division strategies, also important, where we can teach students to peel off the affixes, read what's left, and put it together. All important. But we don't want to hold on to those for too long. Your program can't tell you when to let go of the scaffolds because it doesn't know your students. So it may include those scaffolds much longer than your students actually need them. That's up to you to figure out. It's called the art of teaching. Remember, scaffolds are by definition temporary. We want to work toward independence. So if this video got you thinking about improving your phonics instruction, you're invited to my Invigorate Your Phonics Instruction Challenge. In this 5-day challenge, we'll cover lesson structure, spelling, decodable text reading, even morphology, and how to get all of these pieces working together. You'll find the link below this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.